What's going on, guys? You're watching Budget Build Garage, and today we're putting the master cylinder on the Mustang. Here's how we're gonna get started. I'm gonna go ahead and loosen up all the lines off the master cylinder, and then we're gonna pull a cotter pin out from where the brake pedal meets the brake clevis. After that, we'll loosen the whole thing up so we can get a little bit of movement out of it, and I'll slip it off the pedal and pull the whole thing out, and we'll go from there. So when you're doing this, anything on your brake flares, on any of those nuts, you wanna use this style wrench, this specifically for those flares, because they are weak, and if you strip them, you're gonna have a bad time. If you strip them, you're not gonna be able to use that flare, which means you're gonna have to cut that brake line. So if your brake line's good, at the very least, you still have to re-flare that brake line on the car, which is a lot harder than it is to do it off the car, obviously. So try and save as much of those lines as you can. So these ones down here are 7/16. Once you've gotten them loosened up enough, you can switch to a regular wrench, which would really speed the process up. But sometimes you get lucky, you loosen up enough and kind of wiggle and shake them a bit, you can get them hand loosened once you've done the initial stuff. I think that's all of them. The next thing I'm going to do is remove the distribution block. There's two nuts on this side of the fender well. They are 1/2 inch. You can get to them even without taking the tire off, because I put the car down on the ground with the tires on it because it's so much easier to work on from this height. You can get in there with a couple of extensions, pull that thing off, and you should be good. We got the distribution block off. We got all the lines loosened and off. A couple of things I didn't mention before. We did take this export brace off. You don't have to do that. The reason we did that is it's easier for the camera to see what I'm doing. That's the only reason we took that off. Next, it's really hard to film under the dash. In the Mustang, there's not a lot of room under there, and there's a lot of stuff blocking it. So I wanted to show you this pin. This is nothing special, but this is the pin that is holding the clevis and everything there on the brake pedal. Next, this is your brake switch. I pulled this guy off. There's a plug right here. It slides off, and you can usually slide this off really easily because it's got this open one here. So I pulled that off, and I pulled that off. As far as the brake pedal is concerned, it is still hooked up to that master cylinder. Once I remove these bolts, we'll be able to move it left and right, and the brake will come with it. So we'll be able to pull it out a bit, turn it sideways, and slide it right off. Also, if you're working on a nice car, you don't want to ruin the paint, make sure you put down a bunch of towels or, something, basically. You don't want that brake fluid on your paint. It will eat through it quickly. This thing's done. This thing pretty much had no fluid in it whatsoever. Anyways, I got like 2 drops out of it when I cracked them open, cleaned them off, and it's fine now. It's not even dripping. But keep an eye out for that on your car. Well, stop crashing quinceañeras at the park and you won't have to worry about that. Let's see if I can wiggle that bolt out. There it goes. Yep, there it is. Hey, it didn't fall all the way to the floor, and I can reach it. Oh, happy day. It's going to be a good day, boy. Alright. So, unlike Chevy stuff, General Motors stuff, instead of having the studs go through the wall and stay there, this is an actual bolt. It's got nut certs basically in the firewall. That's how it holds on. So we got one off. Let's do the other. Let's get this thing out of here. Alright, there we go. Alright, so this part might be easier with 2 people. You can have somebody slide it off the brake for you in the car. I've done this a couple times, so I know I can pull it away a little bit and then cock it really sideways. You can hear it come off. So you can see right there, that's where the pin goes through. There's a pin on the pedal. So what I did is turned it sideways. I pulled it out enough, the brake pedal will come with it, and then you turn it sideways and it'll come off of that. So there you go. Now that it's off, I can show you. I don't see how good you guys can see this, but it's kind of wet on the firewall here, all the way around here. That means we clearly had a brake leak. So yeah, that thing was junk. It was probably the seals in it had gone a long time ago. But while you're in there, you may want to clean that up a bit before you put the new one on. I meant to do that. Alright, so I'm going to get in there with the wire brush a little bit more, and then I'll wash it off, let it dry, and just hit it with a bit of black spray paint to keep it from corroding or rusting or anything like that. But we're going to move on for now. So here we have the old master cylinder and the new master cylinder. We have the old prop valve or distribution block, whatever you'd like to call it, and we have the new portioning valve with adjustable fluid bias. So when you put this guy in or out, you know, depending, it'll either allow more or less fluid to the rear brakes, so you can decide how you like that feel. Now, a couple of things. This is the old master cylinder. It is a drum master cylinder, so drum here, drum there. When you're choosing a master cylinder, you have to choose a master cylinder that does what you want it to do. So, if you have disc brakes, you need a disc brake master cylinder. There are differences. The key difference is, on a drum master cylinder, they hold a bit of residual pressure in the lines at all times to keep fluid at the wheel cylinder. So if you try to use this on disc brakes, it will actually put the disc brake into the on position just a bit, and you will drag your brakes, or maybe a lot, and your wheels won't turn. So if you're doing disc brakes, you need a disc brake master cylinder. That being said, this here, being a disc brake master cylinder, is actually a disc brake master cylinder, not a disc drum like we have on the El Camino, but we do have drums in the rear of the Mustang. The reason we did this is because we may eventually go to disc brakes in the rear end. If we switch to like a Ford 9-inch or something, it'll be worth it when we do it then. Even though this is a disc and disc master cylinder, you can use the disc and the drum. The way you get around that is by having one of these. Basically, this is a residual pressure valve. This will hold 10 psi in the line at all times. We're only putting this one on the rear. It'll hold the fluid at the wheel cylinder. You're not trying to overpower this. You're not trying to overpower the wheel cylinder and put the brake on a bit. That's not what you're doing. You just want it there so there's no pedal travel before it puts the brakes actually on. You don't necessarily need one of these, so like don't freak out if you don't, but for good pedal feel and like instant turn those brakes on, you'll need one. This is a 10 psi one. This one's awesome. This is kind of the one you need. Side note, if you're running a hot rod and you're putting your master cylinder lower under the car, where a lot of those people do that, you may need one of these, which is a 2 psi one. All this does is keep all the fluid from returning to the reservoir, since the reservoir would be your lowest point when it's under the car. Total side note, has nothing to do with what we're doing, but if you're building a hot rod and you're putting it down low, you may need one of those. So, now that I've explained what we're doing and why we're doing it, I need to talk a little bit more about it, unfortunately. This is where stuff gets confusing. When you're building your brake package, there's a couple things that not everybody tells you and not everybody knows. It comes down to, are you going to use a power booster? Are you not going to use a power booster? What bore size do you need? Stuff like that. That kind of information is a little bit difficult to find the first time you're out building one of these. First thing to do, in my opinion, is decide whether or not you want a booster. That's up to you. It really is preference. A power booster will give you somewhat more of a modern feel. A lighter touch will do more braking. It's pretty cool for like a weekend car, just like, I don't want to say not high performance, but when you get into like really high performance, you want that brake pedal to feel the same way every single time you touch it, no matter what engine RPM or vacuum you're making, and that's the problem with the booster. If you don't make the exact amount of vacuum, your brake will feel different. So if you have a really big, thumpy, lopey cam, you're not going to make a lot of vacuum. Your brakes are going to suffer in certain conditions, and I don't like that. I love a regular manual brake with a really good valve in it. What I mean by valve is the actual bore size. There's a lot of different bore sizes. The smallest being 7/8. So 7/8 is the maximum amount of pressure. If you're a lighter, smaller person, you run a 7/8. It'll be an awesome, super firm pedal. It's my favorite. Next up from that would be a 15/16. That's kind of your all-around, your normal size guy. Would love that one too. 1 inch is in between. 1 inch you can go manual, you can go booster. That's a pretty common one you'll find. You could stick one of those on for a really cheap disc brake upgrade. Like, I think the one off the Camaro is a 1 inch bore, so you can run it either with power or without power. That's up to you. Anything bigger than a 1 inch, though, I say you need a booster for. That's my preference. I mean, if you have one and you like it, that's cool. It's not like it's dangerous. We're just going for awesome pedal feel here. This one, I don't know if I mentioned, is the 7/8 bore. It's my favorite. It's the one I'm using. Now, the next thing we're going to do is put this thing together. Fuck, I feel like that was a lot of info. Your Wilwood master cylinder has ports here, ports on this side. You get to choose what side you want to use. It really doesn't matter. Whatever you think would be better for your car, use that. That being said, it does come with this bracket. This bracket goes here and holds the proportioning valve. This bracket goes here and holds the proportioning valve, so it makes sense to come off of this side. This is also the side that the original one came off of, so we're setting it up that way. It does come with all the fittings you need. These right here are just plugs. We're going to go ahead and insert these guys with a bit of grease on them so they don't get all gross when you tighten this thing up. Just put this guy in here. And you're going to torque all of these fittings to 20 to 25 foot-pounds. Anytime it gives me 20 to 25, I mean, I usually go to the lowest one. It just seems... If 20 will work, why not? Like, why over-tighten it at all if I know the other one's right? If you disagree with me, tell me why, actually. I'm curious. Okay, now, we still have this old one out for a reason. The reason is I want to measure from the mounting surface where it mounts to the firewall, because that's going to be the same on both. So that's where I'm going to take my measurement from, and I'm going to measure to this lip and this lip, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other one. I want to make sure I get a pretty accurate measurement. So we have adjustment this way, but I think we need to have more adjustment the other direction. Like so, because now I have to take a cutting wheel to this. So, we've decided that we're going to take a little bit of material off that push rod on this master cylinder, and the reason being is that it's like when you're turned all the way in, it's just about right, but I'd rather have a bit of adjustment in or out. I don't always trust the one that came off the car. Everything changes a bit, it's fine. And we have tons of adjustment out, so we need a little more going in. I'm going to take about a 1/4 inch off, maybe slightly less. I've put a couple nuts right here, so once I make my cut, I'll clean it up a bit, and as I run these off, it'll make sure all my threads are good. So, safety glasses. And let's get this done. So, we cut it, I cleaned the threads up with a file, I'm happy, everything threads on nice and clean, there's no snags or anything like that, which is important, because we're definitely going to need to adjust this. I have it very close to the stock one. The final adjustment I'll do will be on the car itself. So, yeah, I guess really, we can put it on and start test fit and stuff. We have the master cylinder pretty much the way we want it. I got the height, or the length, sorry, on the brake clevis set exactly where I'd like it. Next thing we're going to do is set this guy up, the proportioning valve. I'm going to go ahead and cover these up. This is for like that dummy light that comes on your car and tells you have low brake fluid. You can run a couple wires to that. If you have one, it comes with the wires you need to plumb it to this. We don't have one. We're not going to use that. You're going to give these just a bit. Don't tighten these way up yet. Just put them on. Leave everything loose so you're not forcing anything anywhere it doesn't want to go. Alright, so should look something like that. We're going to install it like this. That way we can build the brake lines off of it. We know they'll be where they should be. Then, after we do that, unfortunately we're going to take it apart again so we can actually bench bleed this thing. We're getting ready to install this thing. We have the original brake lines. They were all in good shape. The flares are good. They came apart relatively easily, so I'm going to reuse them. The way I'm going to reuse them is with these union joints. You can get a couple of these from AutoZone or CarQuest or wherever you'd want. These are 3/16, 3/8 by 24. So both of these sides basically will connect to a different side. So all I'll need to do is build a few inches of brake line from the proportioning valve to the originals. These seal up just fine. Really, it's the best way to do it instead of replacing all of the lines when you really only need like 4 or 5 inches. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to put this side on all of them. The back one, however, is a bigger size. It is a 7/16 by 24. So it's a little bit bigger. I've plumbed it into this guy on this side and a standard one on this side. Now this is an NPT fitting on these sides, not like your brake flares. We're gonna go ahead and screw these guys down. The reason we're doing this now instead of after we put the master cylinder in is honestly it's just easier to get these parts tightened down and secured and not have to try and work around it. So that's really the only reason. If you did it the other way, it might just be in your way a bit. Alright, so we're gonna install this guy right now. I got a new brake switch. This thing was like $8. I recommend doing it. It's a pain to do it later. You might as well do it. There's a couple of these. These are plastic spacers. There's one on this side, on the brake part itself. This guy's going to slide on here, and this guy's going to go through, take up a little bit of space like that. That's how that's going to work. So I'm going to have Taylor hand this through. I'm going to be on the inside, and I will slide all this into place and pin it, and we'll be done. This won't come off again as far as the master cylinder. The proportioning valve will have to come off so we can bench bleed it, but we're just going to bench bleed it on the car. If you're not comfortable building brake lines, don't worry about it. You can go to your local parts store, pretty much any of them, ask them for, in the back usually, they usually have them up front. They have sections and lengths of all different sizes with all the flares already done and the fittings already on them. If you know your fittings, which we do, and I'll link them in the bottom which ones these are, yours may differ a bit, you can go in and buy like 8-inch lengths or 6-inch lengths already made, and they're only a couple of bucks. Go buy yourself an assortment of those and have fun bending them up and then just putting them on. You'll be fine. You don't have to buy the flaring tools. If you don't have them, don't worry about it. Buy a few of those lengths, and really you need like 6 to 8 inches to come down and back up to the other joint. It's kind of easy. Let me build a couple. I'm not going to do it on camera because honestly it takes a little bit. I'll build a couple and then I'll show you what I did. I have made all of my brake lines. This is the back one, comes up, around, and over. This is the middle one, and this is the front one. There you go. So I'm going to go ahead and install it. I'm going to start with the back one. A couple of things to remember when you're building these, you want them all to leave like whatever you have, like the master cylinder, or the proportioning valve, you want them to leave in the same direction. You don't want one coming out one way, one coming the other way, because when you try to tighten them up with a wrench, you won't be able to get to them all. Stay out of your own way with stuff like this. Make sure it's serviceable, make sure you can take it apart fairly easily, and reach every single fitting. So, as you can see, I've built a bunch of brake lines. It does take a while. It can be tedious. Honestly though, I like it. It's fun. This is what I was talking about. I have them all coming off of one side. I have plenty of room away to get to the Allen bolts on the proportioning valve. I didn't block the proportioning valve screw. Everything's pretty much how I want it, and now the depressing part, I need to take it apart. We need to bench bleed this thing. We didn't want to put it in full of fluid and mess around with it a bunch and have it just kind of... I don't need any blood. I'm getting tired, I'm sorry. I don't need any brake fluid messing everything up. So now we're going to take it apart, bench bleed it, put everything back on, tighten it up, put the car in the air, and then bleed the whole brake system, check for any leaks and stuff like that. So let's just get to it, I guess. I'm only taking off the new lines I just put on and the proportioning valve lines. I've got the brake lines torn off of this thing. I got the proportioning valve off of it just because it was in my way a bit. Now we're going to bench bleed this thing on the car. What I've done is I cut the old brake lines off the master cylinder, the old master cylinder, so I can screw this in here and bleed with these, because I don't like the little rubber hoses they come with and the plastic fittings. It's just not great, you know, especially when you have these lying around. You might as well try what I'm doing. They're a different size. They might be a different size. Yes, they are. Damn it. Alright, scratch that. Got these cool little plastic fittings that are like kind of junk, to be honest. Usually I would take the old brake lines and cut them and wrap them and do that with those, which is kind of cool, but I'm not doing that right now. Just gonna... There we go. Alright, so we have that set up. The next thing you need to do is get a bunch of towels or rags or anything you'd like and put them on anything that brake fluid may drip on. Save yourself and your paint some work. It's like I went through all the trouble of getting Wilwood stuff. It's like I might as well use the Wilwood brake fluid. This is the high temp racing brake fluid. This stuff's pretty cool.
We're just bleeding them though, so we're gonna like spill it out.
Nah, we're gonna, when you bench bleed something, we're recycling it all back into itself, which is why we're using these.
Gotcha.
Thank you for that, because I feel like I didn't explain that, which is why you said that, isn't it?
That's right. That's exactly what I was talking about.
So you need to make sure that these hoses are submerged the entire time. If the fluid level drops below, a lot of times it'll suck more air into it, and then you're just kind of working against yourself. Helps to have a buddy do this. You can do it yourself as long as you don't push it too crazy, the brake pedal. You shouldn't be spilling any fluid anywhere. Just go nice and slow, like really long full throws and then short and vice versa, and alternate them, and just do it until you're very confident there's no air left in this thing. Alright, go ahead. Ooh, look at all those bubbles. It's so pretty. We gotta pull these lines off. Be very careful. Again, brake fluid eats paint. Be careful. I like to pull it off, pinch it and pull it off from here, and kind of hang it so all the fluid goes into there before I pull it off. And like that. And then I spilled a few drops. And luckily those drops are just going right on to those towels I put there. I think there's a bit of pressure on it, just a tiny bit, and it's forcing, it's basically pushing fluid out. It really shouldn't be pushing much fluid at all. I mean, a couple of drops is fine, but it was kind of steady right there, so I think we're wrong on our adjustment. Which is unfortunate, but not the end of the world.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how easy was that?
Overall, it's fairly easy. I mean, you get some fittings that are stubborn. They're just not quite bent perfectly straight, and it takes a while to get those right. And then when you're dripping brake fluid, and you know brake fluid's bad, you're trying to like hurry, mistakes are made, and it just makes everything go longer. So, take your time. Don't mess with it. Don't worry about it too much. Just kind of get it to where it's good, and that's a terrible wrap up.
Mistakes were made.
Mistakes were made. No, I mean, you know, that's working on cars. At the end of the day, you can sit there and worry about it all you want, and you can set it up the best you can. We took the whole thing, we put the whole thing on, put the whole thing together, everything went together perfectly. We took it apart so we can, you know, bench bleed it, try to put it back together, and nothing wanted to fit right. And some of that, like I said, is because, you know, you're in a hurry. There's a bit of brake fluid dripping, and then hurrying just kind of makes mistakes, and oh well. So yeah, it went together fairly easily, I will have to say. Like, it's annoying when you get angry, but oh well. So yeah, it's together. All that's left to do, honestly, is put it back up on jack stands and start pumping fluid through it and check for leaks and then bleed them. And that's it. Like, that's the install. It's there. It's good. On the next video, we should have this thing out. I'll show you how to bed the pads, and we'll see if this thing actually stops for once. So if you liked it, go ahead and drop us a like, comment, subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next video.